and I'm sure we'll be joined by others, hopefully momentarily.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Bang bang. All right, we got. Oh,
I'm liking your hair, by the way. It's very cool.
It's getting out of control.
I'm in
It started as
serious
just like
envy.
It's very different than the hair that I remember.
it is very different than the hair that everyone remembers. Yeah, right. And yeah, but
Uh,
it's yeah, it's kind of liberating in a weird way.
well, guys,
Yeah.
we're live.
All
Rich
right.
Vreeland, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Clayton. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
So
So
for those
go ahead.
of the people at home who don't know your work, and not only just you as Rich Vreeland, but also as Disasterpeace, tell the people kind of how they would know you.
Yeah, so I started making music as a teenager, got into video games, like video game covers, and then through that discovered chip tunes. Then actually I went to a chiptune show in New York City in 2005, maybe. And actually, glomag was playing at the show. It was the first show I ever went to. I think you were on the set with Null Sleep and Anna Monoguchi and Bubbly Fish, maybe.
Holy shit! I don't remember this. Was this at the tank, or was it like something
I,
else?
I think it was at the Tank. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Amazing.
so that was like kind of my introduction to that space. And um, yeah, I was sort of like I was kind of in a different trajectory. I was doing graphic design, and I decided to drop out and do music, and just didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew that I loved making music. Kind of got into realized that music production was way too complicated for me as a teenager, and I just like discovered chiptunes and kind of went down that route for a long time. And then kind of found my way back to games, and I've worked on lots of games and movies and TV shows, mostly scoring, but also I do a lot of programming, and sound design and stuff like that. So,
Excellent. We're joined by Mike Hall, who's right above you there.
hello,
Um,
Mike.
Mike,
Hey,
meet
man.
Rich. Cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you a bit about your background, but you pretty much covered that. I mean, I think I probably became aware of you right around that time. The first track I heard by you was a collaboration with Spamtron, which was the Disastertron. Was it called
Wow.
Lulla Twerp? Is that the name of the song?
Lola Twerp, yeah.
It's
Deep cut.
awesome. Yeah, I was just playing it for Clayton before he jumped in,
That
but
was
yeah.
back when it was easy to make that kind of sound with the singing. That particular speech synthesizer is no longer available.
Is that right?
Yeah, the developer who he passed away, and so like I think there's a bunch of records from like the early aughts, late 90s that use that same software, and
Mm-hmm.
now you need to run like an old computer to even use it, like a
Wow.
like a very old computer.
Yeah, break out the
Right.
emulators, man.
Yeah, but yeah, Lola Twerp was very a very unusual kind of one-off thing that we did that was pretty fun.
It's super catchy, and I just love the melody. It's one of those melodies that kind of go, don't they repeat, but they repeat after a very long iteration of the melody, you know? So it's really
Yeah,
fun because it takes you a few listens to learn the whole melody in your head, and then you can kind of sing along with it. But yeah, I really love it.
thank
That
you.
was, yeah, it was the beginning. But so yeah, I remember obviously seeing you at shows. I saw you at Magfest back in the day. I don't know. God, that was probably the last time I saw you perform was at Magfest with Roger. I'm trying to remember his artist name.
Recadam.
Recadam. Thank you. Recadam.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that was excellent. That was so much fun. Or was that Eight Static Festival? God, I can't remember now.
we
But
played at both.
yeah,
So
I probably saw you.
I think Eight Static was more recent. That would have been
Yeah,
2013, which
yeah,
is and I haven't really done any live shows in the last like six years or
I
something.
bet. Well, you're pretty busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Um, so were you what was it like, were you early on, like you told us about how you got into game music just doing games, video game soundtrack covers. um, when did you get into film music? When did you start thinking about film music? And how what struck you about like how it was different from chiptune and from just video game music? And
Yeah, I kind of I kind of got pulled into film. It was never really like I was always open to it, but it wasn't really my focus. My focus was always games. And then I worked on this game Fez, and this director really liked the score to that game and uh, reached out to me and to score his horror movie. And I'd never done any films, and I had very little like familiarity with horror in general. And I was also really busy at the time, and I actually like said no a bunch of times. It took me a while to kind of come around and basically agree to do it. Um,
that was
and
David Robert Mitchell.
David Robert Mitchell, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
then
it followed.
obviously, it was like it turned out good. It turned out really good, and the reception was really surprising. Just like first movie project, and hey, everybody loves it.
Yeah, you turned
Uh,
out to have a real knack for it, I think. Pretty
yeah,
quickly.
I think so.
Yeah.
Um,
It's one of my favorite horror soundtracks, really, of all time. I mean, I really it's
wow.
the pieces are iconic, but there's a lot of mood. There's a lot of very heavy mood.
Mhm.
Melodically, it's really interesting. Your
Thank you.
chord structures and your chord kind of harmonic movement in your pieces has always really fascinated me. By the way, we're joined by Tamara Yadal, aka Corset Lore. I think you met Tamara at a show at some point,
It was
probably Eight Static.
okay. Yeah, a long time ago.
Nice
Good
to
to
see
see
you.
you, though.
You too. You look familiar.
Yeah. So Tamara's doing
Yes, yes.
and
For several
electronic
years.
stuff as Corset Lore. So yeah,
Cool.
she's one of our musical questioners
Powerhouses.
and yeah, and powerhouses.
Awesome.
She also plays a role in Mandible Judy, which is the podcast that we're all a part of.
Awesome.
So yeah, It Follows really struck me. And I think So did that lead to a lot of other film work at that point?
It led to a lot of opportunities that I mostly turned down. There was a lot of um, a lot of other opportunities to do horror films, but a lot of it was like a lot of like slasher movies and stuff like that, and I didn't really think that that was the direction I wanted to go in. And I also didn't want to be pigeonholed because I just did one movie, and I didn't want to like suddenly just become the horror music person.
Yeah.
Like I've always liked to kind of like play the field and experiment and explore different like styles. So um, yeah, it was, I mean, there were a lot of like there were a lot of interesting opportunities. There was, I think, a Saw project that was potentially going to happen that I decided not to do. Stranger Things was the big
Yes.
one
Right.
that I decided not to do. Uh,
Do you
Can you
have
imagine
regret
turning
on
down
that, or are you like,
Yeah, I mean, you didn't know at the time, right, that it was going to be this huge thing.
no, I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, I read the script and I, saw one of their previous movies and I like thought about it and I was like, it's very Spielbergy and I didn't really like the movie that they had made. So I just decided not to do it. It was also really soon after It Follows that I got that they reached out to me. So
Well, I dare I say, I mean, I like the soundtrack to Stranger Things fine. The guys who did it are a couple of Austin people. They
yeah,
did
they're
a
very nice. I've met them before.
Okay,
Nice
I've never
guys.
met them, but I have to say, like, I think if you had done it, it would have sidestepped the very tropey. I mean, the series itself is
Mhm.
loaded with horror tropes, and I think that's the whole point. It's just
Yeah,
one big hauntological. Remember this?
it's like
Or-
Goonies. It's like a Goonies horror
Yeah.
movie.
yeah,
yeah. And I think if you had scored it, it would have pulled it out of that just enough to make it much more
Mm.
interesting to me.
Yeah, when I've seen like bits of it, I wonder about what the structure was with the music direction because I felt like from what I saw that the way that the music was handled was not how I would have gone about it, and there was like the music was often kind of in the background in
Exactly.
moments that I felt like the music should be really forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best things that I appreciated about my collaborations with David Mitchell is that he really pushed for having the music really be front and center. I mean, and It Follows, the way that that movie is shot is very sort of like naturalistic, and there's a lot of space. So the
Mm.
music just has all this room to really come in and like be like another character and just kind of be really loud and kind of intense. And I think that actually helps with creating the vibe of that movie.
Well, and when you've
Excellent.
got, and this is certainly true of your, I think notably true of your work, your despite the what I think a lot of people will term as a limited palette from a sound or at least a bit depth, right? Your
You talking about his
compositions,
chiptune work?
I mean,
Yeah,
I've
your-
done
your-
orchestral work, and
your compositions are always incredibly moody and incredibly emotional, and they've got this huge range. So even when you're operating in a very small palette, you tend to operate in ways that I think a lot of people who get into a particular genre will just say, okay, well, here's what, the genre expects, and this is all I'm going to deliver, whereas yours tend to fall outside that, and I think in a positive way, not in a, oh, what is this?
well, thank you. Yeah, I guess I don't know. It helped in the case of It Follows and some of the other projects I've done, like the other movie that I did with Mitchell, Under the Silver Lake, both genre movies where I came in basically green, like I didn't have a lot of experience or familiarity with those genres, and I think that process actually helped me because it allowed me to have fresh ears and kind of put just because I was kind of a noob, but like it just made it automatically kind of a fresh spin on it, because I was just kind of figuring it out. And um, yeah, I don't know. And I guess for me, like I never tried to accomplish particular like sounds or something like that. It's more like, let me, especially on those projects, it was like having strong collaborators who have like a really good template for what they're looking for. Like the temp scores for both of those movies are really, really strong, and I kind of like just tried to internalize what they were doing like functionally, and then kind of forget about the specifics and just try to write with those ideas in mind, but kind of try to take it in my own direction, I guess.
Can you explain to the audience? Some of our audience might not know what a temp score is. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah. Yeah, so in movies and television, a lot of times they will cut the film or the show to reference material, like reference music, because it's sort of like they're workshopping ideas, and it's not always practical to have a composer writing all this music to these scenes that are constantly changing. Some composers, some composers work that way. Personally, I find that to be a bit much, because you end up writing, 5, 10 times as much music as actually gets used, and it's
Right.
just kind of insane. So I really like it when I personally like working from a temp score. I think if you have the right mindset for it, you can do really good work. You just have to be careful that you're not like, adhering to it too closely, or it can also, there can be like you can run into issues with directors who are really attached to certain pieces of music and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that is a thing where, yeah, it's like, well, I got the mood, and I hope they're like, they don't see it sometimes. They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
the
Well,
mood is enough. It has to be the same damn piece of music,
yeah,
like,
exactly. It's like nothing you do, you could do the best thing ever, it's not going to matter because they're just attached to something. And it's actually funny because on It Follows, like half of the film was temped with music from Fez, like a game that I scored.
oh, awesome.
So that made things really weird and challenging, because I had to try to like outdo a former version of myself in his eyes, and
Yeah.
it made it a little bit awkward at times, but for the most part we managed to figure it out.
I can kind of see the inspiration a little bit in there, but they're very obviously very different. I mean, Fez
Yeah.
has a lot more mood wise. It's a lot more kind of spacious and just kind of contemplating and kind of experiencing, and
Yeah.
It Follows is very dramatic.
There's just a couple of cues in Fez that have a darker kind of tone,
Yeah.
that Mitchell kind of honed in on. Like there's this track Death from
Death, right?
Fez,
I was gonna say.
which was
Appropriately
basically that was basically the stand-in for the theme song of the movie.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I would love to see that cut in to see how it works.
It worked.
there's-
It probably worked pretty good.
Yeah.
I was going to say I noticed that there's a lot of similarity for me in just some of the textures just from Fez, and also in It Follows, like some of your kind
Yeah.
of noisier textures, which I actually really like so much because it's a very unique sound, I guess. I just have not heard noise um, used, I mean, just created in that way
Yeah.
before. I think
Thank
that's
you.
kind of pretty cool.
I was sort of
Go
pushed in
ahead.
that direction, I think, because the temp score being from Fez, a lot of it, it kind of pushed me in that direction where I was always trying to make it as different as possible, but there's sort of this like figuring out the in between where I was happy and the director was happy, and so a lot of like the techniques from Fez, kind of a lot of them ended up on the It Follows score too.
Very
That's
cool.
nice though, because I mean, it's still kind of like you're being hired for your work, not, as like you were brought in as somebody whose work, the director liked and wanted, your kind of
Yeah,
style and your sort of approach. So that's ideal, actually, I think, as an artist.
yeah.
Coming into film, that was your first one, right? So
hmm Yeah, there's
yeah.
it's definitely great to work with somebody who wants to work with you specifically. Um, the only issue that I run into sometimes is people want you to do the same thing you did already. And for me personally, like what motivates me is doing things that are different. So if someone's really keen on having me like recreate the same kind of sound, that can be a bit of a struggle for me,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists who, composers and just artists, that are represented in galleries and whatnot, they get picked up a lot for certain things that they did. And I've known people in the past that have said, I had to break up with my gallerist because, they were saying, can you recreate those sculptures you did, 10 years ago? And she was like, no, I can't. I'm like not there anymore. I'm like at a
Yeah,
completely different place in my process and my life. So
more
that's that.
more power to her to take the stand, It's not
Yeah,
always
yeah,
easy to
totally.
do, especially if you're like trying to, make a living or whatever.
Right, right. No, totally. Yeah,
There's
that's true.
Cool.
there's apparently a moment where, and it's a horrible movie, but Kevin Smith directed Cop Story or whatever it was with Bruce Willis and so on.
Mhm.
And he wrote a portion of that scene where he basically wanted Bruce Willis to call back a particular role from Moonlighting, I think it was. Um, and he was trying to walk around it and walk around it and walk around it and get sort of Bruce Willis to just kind of fall into the role by just mentioning things tangentially related. And Bruce, I guess, goes, "So you want me to?"
Subconsciously.
Yeah, he goes, "So you want me to just do that scene again from Moonlighting?" And Kevin was like, "I mean, yeah, if you don't mind." And
Oh,
Bruce goes,
that's
"All
so
right, well
annoying.
that's fine, but this is your one take." And apparently, it became like this really that from that point forward, it became super contentious during the entire recording for the exact reason you just mentioned. Don't don't ask me to go back to 30 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever it was, and rehash something I did. It's old and stale now. Give me something new. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's funny how that carries across. I guess it's not funny. It's appropriate that carries across through all the different sort of walks of life and so on. But
Yeah, I find it frustrating because I want the collaborators that I work with um to be proactive and to be thinking about like, oh, I have this like talented person I'm working with and I want to like channel them to do something new and
mm-hmm.
interesting as opposed to like, oh, I already decided that I want this thing that already exists. And like, I guess from my perspective, it's like if you want that, like try to go get the licensing to that or something. And why, like,
Yeah,
why am I doing it? Like this already
Right.
exists. Like I don't understand.
yeah,
Um, like to me, the whole joy of like making stuff with people is the collaboration and like reaching new territory together as opposed to like retreading
for sure.
stuff.
Hmm.
To that
Yeah.
same end, is there a different thing sort of that scratches the itch for you doing film scores versus video game scores? I noticed just in your discography you've got a lot more video game play.
Yeah, my preference is working on games. I would say I got kind of pulled into film and saw it as an interesting opportunity and decided to try it for a while. And overall, I find that there are other things that I would rather do, and a lot of it has to do with just the logistics of film and TV, the culture. Like, there's a lot about it that I don't like. It gets very complicated because there's always tons of people involved and lots of different organizations, and so that it's very political. There's a lot of like self-preservational behavior, producers you never meet making decisions about your work. Like, it's a lot of backdoor kind of stuff. And fortunately, I've been able to work on smaller projects that have been successful, and so I'm in a position where I could continue to do that. And so, going forward, that's kind of what my plan is to work on smaller projects and to work on less commissions and to focus more on like personal projects. And maybe there's like a cool movie or show or something down the line that I want to do, but in general, I tend to be more motivated these days by like music technology stuff, and I have a ton of personal projects that I just been like collecting dust, like old like music and music software and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's kind of where my focus is right now.
I wanted to ask you a question, Rich, about, I mean, I feel like we could take some time on this particular topic, the orchestral scores that you've done. But before we get into it, have you done an orchestral score for a video game? I know it's not done very often, but
Yeah, I mean, I did like a stylistically an orchestral score, but it wasn't with a live orchestra. I scored this game maybe 6 or 7 years ago, called Cannon Brawl, which is like a spinning plates multiplayer type game where you have a blimp and you're like flying around and you're like managing different like units that do different things, like shields and cannons and stuff like that. And I did this sort of like orchestral marching music, and that was pretty much my first like proper like orchestral project. So I just kind of got like a little taste of it, and then when I had the opportunity to actually work with an orchestra, I decided to kind of dive much deeper into it.
do you want to talk about that process a little bit? I mean, I know that it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess to me, the thing, having never done it, having written stuff for orchestra, but sampled orchestra, orchestral
Yeah.
arrangements,
Mhm.
what fascinates me and kind of makes me scared is the way is you basically have to really give up a lot of
Yeah.
control. I mean, you really have to give up a lot of
Yeah.
control. So how did that work for you?
Yeah, so I guess my approach was to try to have my cake and eat it too, in the sense that I tried to like make my demos as good as humanly possible, to the point where I'd basically be happy, like almost happy, like just, going with the demo. And then we'd orchestrate for, we'd prepare to have an orchestra record those pieces. And, if they were able to do something much better than I was able to do, like in the box, like then great, and we'd replace it. There were times where things they did didn't really work aesthetically, and we had to pull it. We did a lot of what they call striping, which is where you like take out sections and you record them separately. So you might just record the brass or just the strings or individual parts, variations. Like, we did a lot of that kind of stuff too, so that we had flexibility. And it's sort of like this living, breathing organism, and you have limited amount of time because you're basically like burning money like every moment you're in a studio with like 50 musicians. So
For sure.
Yeah.
we just tried to like like fly through all the tracks, and then if we had extra time, we'd like, oh, could you guys just like do this one thing, like play this chord, like, and I'd experiment with like having the brass players use different mutes, or just like I try to use up all the time and come up, like anything that we
Right.
could gather, like grab bag that could help with basically, because not only was I going to get the orchestral performances mixed, and to reincorporate them into the demos, which is what we ended up doing, but also I kind of approached it like collaging, where there were performances where we had things separated a little bit. So we'd take this part, we'd use the brass, we wouldn't use the strings.
I got
There
you.
were times where like people, the orchestral, the first chair violinist, who's also the contractor for the orchestra. He would like come up with ideas sometimes. We had a lot of people like trying to help make the process smooth, and sometimes it was a little like too much. But there were times where Kyle, the orchestral producer, and Kyle is as a film composer as well, and he helped me a lot with logistics. We'd be like, this isn't really working. Like, what can we do? The first chair violinist would be like, oh, I know what we can do. Like, what if we do this section this way, like just violins? And so there would be things where we would have to change, we would have to change what we do on the fly, like not even writing it on the page. Like, let's
Right.
just, we're gonna do this.
Give the
We're gonna do this
players the
vibrato or whatever, like this articulation, like right on the stand or on the stick, they call it. Um,
on the
so.
stick.
So
Yeah.
to that, appropriately enough, did you come with a conductor, or did you get to go in there and?
Oh
give
God,
them
I mean,
direction?
I think I technically could, but it's been a long time since I took conducting in college, so I think it would be a total disaster if I tried to hey, it's been 12 years, but I think I could do this. So we had like a proper conductor.
The few
Which-
times I've been in the studio without not being an engineer with a band or whatever like that, it's like the old Price is Right timed things where you hit the buzzer, okay, go, and you have 60 seconds to do everything you got to do, and you got to get it all done. And if you have any time left over, I know
Yeah.
exactly that time crunch. I know that.
Yeah.
How you talking
We
about?
I think we had 9 hours, 3-hour sessions.
Mhm.
We had to we had to hit a rate of like recording. So it's like there's a big strategic meeting about like, okay, what's the order that we record these in? We have to start with the pieces that need the entire orchestra so that we
Yeah.
can send people home and save
Yeah.
money. Like, there's all
Right.
this crazy stuff that goes into it. We had to hit 8 minutes of music per hour. So it's very intense, but it's super exhilarating and is the most fun. By far, the most fun I've had working on movies is being in the recording studio.
Awesome.
Is-
And they are viewing and listening to the dialogue in the scene as well at the same time, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I think for Under the Silver Lake, we piped in the visuals of the film.
Mhm.
But it didn't always work because sometimes there were technical errors, like it'd be out of sync or something. I think on Triple
Yeah.
Frontier we didn't even do that, if I recall correctly. That score we recorded more like in sections. Like we rarely had the whole orchestra. It was more like, oh, we have a string section and a brass section, and we'll be strategic about, oh, this piece we might want to add some brass, this piece we might want to add some strings. So it's more it was like overdubs almost.
Okay. And were you involved in the editing of I imagine the editing must have been a big part of the creativity here, because you're taking things that are not always in sync with each other, lining them up almost like a sound collage, right?
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yeah, basically the orchestral recordings would get mixed by an orchestral mixer. Actually, I
Okay.
worked with this guy Damien, whose last name I can't remember, but his dad was in the Wrecking Crew. If you know the
Oh,
Wrecking
my
Crew.
Yeah, of course.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
Very
That's
Very cool
royalty.
guy. And then so he would send me the stems of the orchestra, and then I would go through them and reintegrate them into the pieces, because the pieces, we record the orchestra, but sometimes the movie is still shifting and scenes are changing and things are getting readjusted. So I have to there's a lot of finagling that has to happen with the
Right.
timing of
But
things.
you still end up giving the re-recording mixer a final stereo mix of all the music, right? Or do you sometimes give them stems so they can then bounce?
Yeah.
They can play around even more. the
It's
re-recording
pretty
mixer.
it's pretty standard these days to give them stems. They ask for they want categories, so percussion, bass, strings, that sort of thing. It's usually what they want.
Makes sense.
On
Wow.
Triple Frontier, they had their own stems for Lars Ulrich's drumming.
I was
Jesus.
gonna ask you about Lars
I was
Ulrich.
going to ask
Yeah.
you about, I mean, not just about Lars Ulrich, just in the hiring of the musicians. I mean, do you guys, I mean, do you yourself have, say in that? And I mean, I would assume that if you know particular players that you want, a sound from, that yes, you could, hire them if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the players is kind of up to me, and by proxy, I would bring in somebody to help me with that because I'm still sort of an outsider. Like I've only done that whole thing twice. So the people that I worked with on Under the Silver Lake are the same people that I brought in on Triple Frontier. Sometimes things are complicated politically, and maybe you're sort of persuaded to hire certain people over other people because it's gonna protect you or something. Like it can get complicated, but for the most part, like the nitty gritty of like musicians, there's usually you can pretty much hire who you want, unless there are also like union things that you have to keep into consideration too, like whether or not it's going to be a union gig. Which is a big thing, especially in LA.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Tamara.
Okay.
No,
I was just,
after you.
so, I mean, I'm sure everybody is curious, but, so did you want Lars Ulrich on the score for Triple Frontier then? Just, I mean, as far as his, like,
It's a personal
I mean,
No,
just like his double bass work and, goes and,
his
I'm just
pizzazz.
curious. Yeah,
It was not my
Jazz
idea.
hands?
Oh, okay.
Nice.
It was not my idea, but Lars is awesome. He was awesome. Like it was the best part of that project. Maybe outside of the recording studio. I mean, going in the recording studio with him was super fun too. I had a blast because I got to go to Metallica headquarters, which was amazing. It was so cool. And he's just the nicest guy. He's really fun, and yeah, it wasn't my decision. It was sort of a political thing. But I was glad to collaborate with him. It was really fun, and I think what he did added something, for sure. So it was cool.
I'm glad to hear that he's a good guy because I worked in music for like 10 years, live sound and studio sound, and and worked with a lot of different people. I never got to work with them, but I saw them live like 3 times, before I get into it. And I had heard a lot of rumors that he was difficult to work with, but I'm glad to hear that he wasn't for you.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe he was. He's been around for a long time, so I'm sure he's grown up a bunch.
Yeah, exactly. He's also a well known as an art collector, which is interesting. I do a lot of I used to do a lot of audio for Christie's, the auction house, and they often interviewed their specialists and their art collectors, and he was one of them. And I was like, wait, the Lars Ulrich? I'm editing audio from dialogue or whatever, an interview with him, and yeah, it's kind of cool because I got to see him in this whole different incarnation, like talking about. God, I remember I think it was Paul McCarthy or somebody like that, some modern, contemporary artist that he had collected a bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's fascinating. I could see, it totally, when I saw his name in the credits, I was like, yeah, that makes sense because you rely a lot on kind of heavy percussive kind of underlining of bits and themes and,
Yeah.
it totally makes sense that he's got a very dramatic kind of percussive style.
Yeah.
So and
it was just like the way that it ended up working was it was just kind of this like glue that went underneath everything. Aesthetically, like the drums when they were out front, it was like very different than the score. So it was sort of like a balance to like figure out how to actually incorporate these very like heavy metal like studio drum sound. With like digital reverb kind of like sound, like with like sort of the sound of the score. But I think especially on the soundtrack, it really like adds a lot.
And so was that an overdub, or was he in the room with you with the orchestra?
No, it was an overdub.
Okay.
Basically, like picked, a handful of cues that we thought would be good to have him kind of play to, and it was sort
Mm.
of an experiment because he had never, I don't think he'd ever done anything like that, and he was really excited to be a part of a movie project because I don't think he'd ever, yeah, it was new to him, and he loves movies, and I don't think it would have been appropriate to like ask him to like read this sheet music and here's these prepared parts. It was more like we're gonna play the track and like just do what you think feels good. And
You weren't going to take the
um
opportunity to crack the whip?
Not with him.
Come on, Lars.
Not
those
with
are
him.
those are not triplets. That's
Yeah.
not a
You know,
triplet.
Lars,
Lars,
you were a
I'm
little
telling you.
late on that
Yeah.
fill. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
was-
sure that would have been great.
Gonna need you to do that
I'm really
again,
liking
Lars.
this. I'm really liking this red going over one side of you here. It's very horror setup here.
Oh yeah, I have red lights throughout my apartment. It'll get worse the
Excellent.
longer we talk.
Nice. It looks great.
Thank you.
Mood music. I'm curious, speaking of mood and speaking of just scoring in general,
Yeah.
if you can talk a little bit about kind of how the sausage gets made when you're starting on a given piece, and you have, whatever, be that the demo tracks or the script, whatever the case is, maybe it's just concept art. Do you start with the particular section? Do you start with the rhythm? Do you start with a melody? Do you start what's your general process when you're going through, especially from a mood standpoint?
It depends. I definitely have certain kind of approaches that I've gravitated towards. One of the approaches though is also just to kind of iterate on the creative process itself and try something completely different than I would normally do. But normally, what I like to do is sit at the piano and just improvise a lot in the beginning and start to kind of get a sense for flavors and harmonic ideas. And then there's sort of a separate kind of session where I will start kind of doing sound world type stuff, like collecting palette. Sometimes I do them at the same time. Sometimes I just write. I'll just start writing like in the DAW and like collecting sounds. I've written tracks where I start with drums. I've written tracks where I start with chords. Melody is probably the least frequent one that I lead with, although I would like to do that more because it yields different results. So yeah, I'm really keen on like trying different things to get different results because in my experience it really influences the way things turn out, and you can get really wildly different things if you kind of turn the process like on its head.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with that palette selection, do you have? I mean, I've got to imagine, just knowing that from a sound design standpoint, that can be both its most enlightening and frustrating portion of a given project. Do you have like a collection of stuff that you rifle through and find, or do you go out and find sort of new every time?
No, I usually collect sounds in my off time. I have a lot of random stuff. I go through phases where I'm interested in a particular kind of thing, and like lately I've been I got really into sound fonts, which is like just a weird treasure trove of stuff. A lot of it is like bad, but some of it like in a good way maybe.
Yeah, right.
You can get in there
call it
and
vintage.
yeah, vintage. But every once
This
in a
is
while,
terrible. You should hear it.
someone recorded this
Yeah.
like one weird instrument really in a really funny way, and it sounds kind of cool and has a lot of character. So, yeah, I will like lately on a recent project, I was literally I had a folder of new stuff, and I was just like going through one by one, like maybe this would work, maybe this would work. Other times I'm like, I want this kind of instrument, or maybe I'm gonna make a synth patch from scratch or something. It kind of depends on depends on the project.
And just to dive deeper into that from a super nerdy standpoint, like when you're playing with a sound, are you going in there grabbing the sound and then fucking with filters and playing with delay and all that, or do you just go click play, let it see it, I don't like it, and move on to the next bit?
It depends on the aesthetic of the project, but but in a lot of cases, especially if I'm working with like samples or something, I will like do a lot of things to it to get it to a place that I think is cool. Like recently, I was writing a track and there was this drum. It was like an old sound font of like a turtle drum or something, and I really liked the lowest velocity of it. So I just deleted all the other velocities and I just used the lowest velocity across the whole keyboard,
Uh-huh.
and then I put like a convolution on it of like a I don't know, like a NASA recording or something, and it sounded like a weird like a steel drum or something. So sometimes I'll like find something and I'm like, there's something to this and I don't know what it is yet, but I'm just gonna like fuck around with it a little bit and see what happens. I I do like to do that. Other times, if I'm like, sometimes I get into this headspace of like I'm in the flow, like I'm in the zone, and I have to make sure that I'm like writing right now because I feel this momentum, and so
Yeah.
I'll just like grab whatever and I'll be
Right.
like, ah. So it really kind of depends on how much how much mental pressure I'm feeling to like get this like idea out before it goes away.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I don't have that, and other times I do.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely find that, and I guess a lot of composers feel this, that sometimes when you're writing, the texture of something is what piques your interest, or the timbre, and you're like all about that timbre, and you're like, it doesn't matter what I play with this damn thing, it sounds amazing. And other
Yeah.
times it's like, well, it's all about the melody, or it's all about the harmony or the bass line or whatever, and I can just swap this out for a different patch later on, Um,
Yeah.
yes. So yeah, I tend to like I've done a lot of work where I take old recordings that I did, like I mean literally like stuff from that I wrote from the 80s. I mean, you know this because I had that that project that you helped back, and
Yeah.
we were talking about it at one point with the old soundtracks from the 80s, and like I
Uh-huh.
love taking them and throwing them in, like basically making an audio track, right, and then just writing new MIDI material over top of it, and like then at the end I decide how much of that original track really stays in there, whether I want to EQ certain things out.
Mhm.
But it's super fun because it gives it like you were saying before, there's something about this sound that I like. There's some, and it's that vintage kind of the air around the sound, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. The
It
space that it
also
was
be
recorded in.
it also becomes like anachronistic in a weird way because it's like it exists in multiple time periods at the same
Right.
time.
Right.
Because a lot of times you make something and it's like, oh, this is like a snapshot of like this particular moment when I made it, or this
Yep.
like window of time from like, a week or a couple of days. So it can be cool to like revisit something and be like, oh, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna add this whole different section or something. And now it's like this cool Frankenstein thing.
Yep. Yeah, I always think of it as I've talked to people about this before, and I always think of it as a conversation with a younger version of myself. I
Yeah.
mean, in this case, it's a much younger version. So I mean, like I'm talking like 30 or 40 years younger. So it's a really strange thing because I'm like obviously not playing very well at that point in my life. Everything I'm performing, you know, just on the fly is just really sloppy. So I kind of sometimes have to sample pieces and fix it and whatever and move it around,
Mhm.
to make it palatable. But there's something about that kind of antique quality of things, or you could call it like kind of audio archaeology in a way, like
Yeah.
you're like digging up the quality of some old timbre from a different recording
Sometimes
system that you.
there's just some weird magic to something, and you can't even really describe
Right.
why
Is it
it
archaeology
sounds
or is it
magical.
necromancy at that point?
I think it's necromancy. And I honestly think if I
Right?
had a conversation with myself from back then, I would be like, "What the fuck were you thinking? God,
Oh,
what?
that is usually. But
Throw it
you know
away."
what, Mike? When you hit a certain, I'm a little bit older than you. I'm
Yeah,
actually a bit older than you. But I can tell you for certain, when you hit a certain age, you're like, I don't care about that anymore. Yeah, yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I can live with it
Yeah.
now.
Are you okay
I
now? I
accept how
mean,
bad I
yeah.
am.
as long as you're okay
Like,
now.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Just
so,
I can
to-
do better now, thankfully.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
better
Clayton.
tools, more experience, absolutely. To
Yeah,
that same end, when you're playing, there's I feel like I've seen in a lot of artists who now are kind of on the scene, they've come back to these. The only one I can think of from a brand standpoint off the top of my head is the Euro Rack, where you've got this whole bank of equipment and all the wires connecting back and forth to play with the different textures and so on. Do you prefer a digital format where you're playing with your DAW and you have, here's all my Dobbs and Niles inside this, or do you like the more tactile kind of experimentation thing?
Dobbs and Niles.
Yeah?
I noticed that too. You
That
said
sounds like-
Dobbs and Niles.
Look,
Sounds like
awesome.
a British,
You just
British
go with it.
detective unit.
You just go with it. It's a...
No, Dobbs and Niles.
Dobbs and Niles. Yeah, no,
What's the term? There's a
Wheels
term
on the
for
leg.
that. It's a oh fuck! The same guy who
Spoonerism.
There's
wrote,
a spoonerism. Yeah,
well,
that's it.
there's a
I think,
spoonerism,
isn't
yeah,
it?
but there's another term. There's a guy who wrote Gödel Escherbach, who's then gone on to write a bunch of
yeah,
other
right.
ones, Surfaces and Essences, which is phenomenal, and where they actually talk about this thing. If you're a geek into nuance, I highly recommend it. I wish I remember the guy's name. His last name is very difficult to pronounce. I don't know what the hell it is, but yeah.
I've tried to get into that book numerous times, and every time I kind of look at it, I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Which one?
I don't know if my schedule's clear enough
Which one?
to get into this book. Gödel Escherbach.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's massive. One, it's heavy shit. You're like, oh, here's the nature of consciousness. Yes, this piece of music is
Yeah.
conscious. What?
I think it's
Okay.
a bit too out. It might be a bit too out there for me.
It's intense. The
This
surfaces
stuff
and
was
essences is pretty freaking cool. They get into that about linguistics and how all things are analogy, and that's sort of their tagline is the fuel for thought is analogy. And so
That's cool.
that's one of his hobbies is he collects when people fuck up a thing that I just did. He'll be like, oh, well, why did he do that? Because his brain clearly put these things together in a particular way. Let's pull that in. They use
When I was a
French lot
kid,
for
when I
that.
was a kid, I always used to do this thing, and I don't know where it came from. Where I would ask people, what comes first, kickoff or the toin costs? And I would always get people to say the toin costs, like always. It just like
Amazing.
it's so I don't know what it is, but maybe certain letters are kind of interchangeable
Sure.
to the brain.
Yeah.
On that note, Clay, I'm definitely stealing Dobbs and Niles, and I'm going to write an episode.
Should.
Excellent.
Just
Dobbs and Niles.
I won't even license it. You can just have it.
thanks, man.
This week we're after Jack the Ripper.
That's nice of you. No customary 10%.
I mean,
Oh yeah,
we're friends. We're friends here.
I'll write him in. I'll write him in.
I want
liner note.
to answer your question.
Yeah.
You'd asked about like knobs and Dobbs and Niles and
Dobbs and Niles.
yeah, I'm pretty much all in the box. Like I definitely have experimented with hardware at different times, but and it's fun. But it was never something that I kind of went really deep into. It's an expensive hobby if you're gonna get into like Eurorack or something like that. And from like a working musician standpoint, it's not the most practical thing. To have to try to like do work on a modular rig or something like that. You don't have like patch recall or anything like that, so it's pretty it's in that way it's really cool because it's so ephemeral and it's like a sand painting or something. But for like doing lots of different kinds of projects and stuff, I always liked the flexibility of software, and also I think because I got really into programming to kind of aid in that, it sort of pushed me down that path even more. And also I kind of like keeping my setup really minimal. I've experimented with like more complicated setups, and I've had like my own like a proper studio and all that kind of stuff. But right now, like my setup is very, very basic. Like it is a desk and like a 61 key keyboard, to like desk like a desktop monitor type. Like they're not even that big, and a laptop, and that's like pretty much it. So try to keep it simple, and it makes it easier to like work remotely when your setup is not really changing that much. So
I guess it's an excellent point. You certainly cannot drag the Eurorack wherever the all you want.
Well, some people
Yeah.
have these little ones that are like eight units
Uh-huh.
in the suitcase. I mean, it's still a heavy thing, but you know, they're fun. They're like, I think they're inspiring creatively. Like a toy. I kind of think of it as a toy. Not to say that you can't do serious work with it. It's just, um, I think because I've always been interested in flexibility and like kind of exploring different like avenues more broadly, it hasn't necessarily been like the most practical kind of thing for me to have hardware really of any kind.
Sure.
Yeah, you're committing to a certain process when you work with that sort of stuff, and I mean, you know, there's obviously some leeway, but I mean, I think
Yeah.
it has to be algorithmic by nature. It has to kind of evolve over time. The piece, it's
Mhm.
hard to kind of write things out, you know, in sections for
Yeah.
for modules.
I
know?
also think that the way that I'm used to thinking about things like algorithms and stuff like that, it's easier for me to wrap my head around it if it's in code versus if it's a bunch of
Yeah.
wires.
Literal analog, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I find that that's maybe a little too um, messy or something for me, and I'm a little too like, I want to make this neat.
God, that's an understatement. For anyone in the audience who does not know what the hell we're talking about, these modular bits of equipment basically turn into a switchboard for effects and sounds.
Telephone operator from the 50s. Yeah.
Right,
E-
exactly.
Except that they then mix
Yeah.
in some eldritch horror level of complexity.
Yeah.
and it's insane.
There is a synthesizer shop in San Francisco, and they always had this really cool print of it was Worf from Star Trek, and he was in front of this massive like modular rig, and he was like dialing it, and I could never find a copy of it, but I want it
No
so bad.
shit.
Like I would love a copy of it. It's so cool. Because that's what it looks like. Looks like some
Yeah.
spaceship.
It absolutely
So-
does.
And he had like a disapproving look on his face.
How do
you
you
know.
not?
Yeah,
like
he's
your
probably
work?
like,
Yeah, that's Michael
Cap-
Dorn.
Yeah.
Captain, recommend we increase the frequency. No.
Yeah, I'm
I
always
need
just
more wires.
I'm blown away by and they you're absolutely right. They look like it's straight out of like almost the original Star Trek, with like the
Yeah.
you know, you expect Uhuru to sit down and you know, drop some beats, give some super dreamy you know, whatever. But no, it always like I'm watching guys like Amontabin or Lapalux or Bonobo sit down in front of their Eurorack and they'll just they play, and it's like, I don't know how the fuck anyone, or Tom York, I don't know how the hell you keep any of that clear in your brain. How do you know that that particular plug does this thing? It's just
They've all got engineers working for them that figure all that shit out. For
clearly.
maybe not Eamon Tobin, I don't know. He probably does it all himself, but Tom York.
It's always so
I mean, I
crazy.
think
It's crazy to me when like someone has a show and like they have one guitar for this song and like one instrument for this song, and they're like, bring me bring me Eurorack number 7 for this piece. Like,
yeah,
they must have like a airplane full of stuff. Like, it's crazy.
right.
Oh, sure.
Roadies, like, you know, dragging out Eurorack setups. That's hilarious.
I
I
feel
have
like
a
people I've seen
yeah.
using Euro racks are mostly just, you know, improvising, you know, and that they just kind of learn, you know, the setup based on that improvisation, and that it's not really like, it's just kind of, you know, that's what their whole, you know, deal is. Do you know what I mean? Or did
Yeah.
you guys cover this already?
No, I think,
And
I think
it's
you're probably
just-
right about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are musicians who write pieces and then will recreate them, but there's definitely a lot of there's a lot more variability, I would say, in like what comes out.
No, I guess what I mean is like, if they're operating from from a very loose structure, like if they, you know, I don't really have any experience with these modular, you know, Euro racks, so I can't really like give you technical examples. But, you know, if they have a loose structure and they're working with maybe 3 parameters, you know, that they'll only work with for maybe like 20 seconds, and then
Yeah.
they'll add a 4th one, and they have like a system, like their composition is composed like a system, then that's what I mean by like the kind of people I've seen using that stuff.
Yeah.
So they're not, you know, they're not like doing conventional composition, but you know, they want they want to, just kind of write a loose score out on paper, like in a systematic way,
Right.
without using
Yeah.
staff. Yeah. And then go perform it so that they can build the variability into their composition.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm sure
really
it's
it's
exciting.
really cool. There's a there was
yeah.
there's an event. Um, there was some sort of event in LA. I can't remember the name of it, but basically it was like a modular meetup where people would go to the river and just sit on the bank of the river, and anybody could show up and like do a set of modular, and it was always
Yeah.
really wild because just the breadth of sounds that you would hear were just crazy. And the only rule was that all of your modular gear had to be completely analog. They're like no LED screens, no keyboards. Like
Are you talking
they're
about
like,
downtown on the river?
it was in LA, like on the east side.
Okay. Yeah,
They
it's
used to
further
do it,
down than I've been.
but they've moved it. I mean, I think they've had it at different locations. I think they've done it in Austin too. I can't remember the name of it, but it was pretty cool.
To have
We're just
traveling
joined in the
band
chat by
under a bridge.
Jenda La Vega, an old friend of several
snap.
of us.
Hey, Jen.
So maybe she has a question. We'll see. Rich, we kind of we covered a little bit of this, but we didn't really talk at length about chiptune. I kind of was interested in your kind of the post-mortem for you. I mean, you're still doing chiptune related stuff, obviously. But you know what I mean? Like, obviously, the era has changed a lot. Things have changed so much. It's kind of hard to get your handle on what chiptune even is anymore. But I mean, what do you? Yeah, Jen says "lol post-mortem."
I laughed too. It was funny.
Yeah. So, but what is your take on like what you got out of it? Like, what do you feel like it changed the way you compose? Do you feel like it?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Like, okay.
It was awesome. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, it was really awesome. It's wild to me that there are people who are still making chiptunes that I was making stuff alongside of. Like, I mean, it's been a really long time. That's really cool. That's so not my personality. Like I'm just kind of moving on to different things. But I would say that the compositional side, because of the limitations of chiptune stuff, like where you're working with just a couple of voices, that really pushed me to get into counterpoint and learning it in a non-traditional way, because I mean I took some counterpoint classes, but I had my own kind of sensibilities about what kind of notes, what kind of pitches I liked together, and working in this limited format really kind of pushed me down that path. So I got really into that stuff, voice leading and the compositional side, and it also allowed me to focus more on that than like on production. Not to say that there isn't production doing chiptunes, but it's much more it was much more approachable for me at that time to work with like more simple sounds. So that was really, really valuable for me and beneficial. But also, all the people that I met and playing live shows for like 7 years was super amazing to be a part of a community. And also like one of the most like eclectic groups of people I think I've ever met, and maybe will ever meet. I mean, it's just wild, like the breadth of people that were involved in that, and maybe still are, were involved in that space, and like their the backgrounds are so wildly different, ethnically, creatively, like in every way, and that was always really, really fascinating to me. So I have nothing but good things to say about it.
Awesome.
In hindsight.
That's great. I'm glad to hear you mention the community, because obviously I think for most people that is the main takeaway from chiptune, is that it's just a really big warm family, at least for the most part. It's not always. There's always infighting and everything. But I mean, there's
some funny like controversies from back in the day, like crystal castles, and
yes.
Remember when people used to fake perform? Like that was a big thing that people got really mad about. Like people who were just like 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 fake pressing buttons on keyboards.
Right. But people would do it sometimes even just to play with you, you know. It was
Yeah, that's
awesome.
true.
I was on a one of I was lucky enough to have done some touring and stuff, obviously, and chiptune was great in that sense because it was a worldwide phenomenon, it still is, and
Mhm.
it was great to be able to go over to Europe and play in like 5 different cities, and
Mhm.
I remember we did I guess it was the Blip Europe, the first Blip Europe. I was lucky enough to be part of that lineup, and we played in Aalborg, Denmark, and we're kind of wandering around Aalborg, and it was I'm not going to remember everybody. It was like 9 people, so it was like Null Sleep, myself, Bit Shifter, Paris Triantafilist, the visualist, um, Minus Baby, Sasquatch. God, I'm trying to remember everybody. I'm almost there. I got
I know all those people.
anyway. Yeah, Jeremy Colsign. Anyway, but we were wandering down the street, and it was like we'd already split into these multiple groups out of the 9, like 3 and 3 and 3, or like 6 and 3, and like it was either based on like who were the drinkers and who were the pot smokers, or who wanted to do this and who wanted to do that, who were like the chill people and who were the aggressive, let's go out and party people.
This morning
And
I woke up in the
at some point, wow, at some point, uh, Jeremiah turned to me. We're walking down the street. No Sleep turned to me and said, we're part of a pretty weird group of people." And it's like, it really struck me that, like, yeah, this is like, what other music genre would bring this unusual collection of people together, to tour?
Yeah.
It was kind of fascinating.
I feel like I have a theory about this, which is that like the distance between weirdos is much greater than the distance between like the average people, maybe. So like even though like it's maybe like some sort of like category, the actual like everyone is like their own like universe, like in some respect. So there's like there's like a vibe to that that's really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, going to something like MagFest or 8 Static Festival or even Blip Festival was really enlightening to me because I got to meet people whose basically like their brain architecture seemed totally different from mine. It's like, wow, people think like this. That's kind of fascinating. Excellent. That's really cool. So, what's coming up? Do you have anything lined up for the future that you can tell us about? Is it all hush hush still?
I'm working on a independent game right now. I just started working on it. It's called Paradise Marsh. It's nice to work on something small and kind of fun. A bit of a throwback. It's sort of like a procedurally generated marsh that you explore, and you collect
Awesome.
bugs, basically. So it's sort of like a sort of opportunity to like get really deep into doing some like environmental music and systems and kind of sink my teeth into something fun and interactive. So that's something that I'm working on.
Are these people that you've worked with before? Is it a new contact?
It's just a new person.
Okay.
2 other people. Yeah. I've kind of been like trying to simplify some of my collaborations, because I tend to like them better when they're simple. So I seem to gravitate towards like the projects where I'm only working with a handful of people.
Yeah, that is one of the big differences, I imagine, between working on a video game soundtrack and a film soundtrack. Many less cooks in the kitchen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, by the way, Jen says you went from collecting snowflakes with your tongue to bugs.
Yeah, it's the same. I don't know. There was other stuff in between.
Yeah, seriously.
If this is my last game, yes, that will be like the byline of my obituary or something.
Yeah, right.
That's perfect.
For some reason, you hate this game.
Do you have a
That's great.
preferred kind of genre? Like what's the genre of game or of movie, whatever the case is, that you prefer that you just you'd be like, man, this is just my happy place, my sort of warm cup of tea?
My preferred genre is um, it's things that feel right to me at the particular time that I do it. There's no
Okay.
preferred genre. It's just my own weird blend of like what would be cool, what would be different, what makes sense for me right now. There's definitely things that I have tried to avoid.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I tend to try to avoid things that are too similar to things that I've already done. But my motivations change over time, and I'm not really like in the same sort of like super ambitious place that I was when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm more interested in like sharing knowledge and working on small things that are fun, uh, and working through my massive backlog of personal projects. I definitely like, there are certain kinds of things that I like. I like games that are funny. I like things that are funny. I like sports. I do like genre stuff. That's not too like, I guess,
Cliched.
gory,
Oh, okay.
or yeah, I don't know. Uh,
You obviously had a
I don't know.
fondness for spaghetti westerns at some point.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like westerns. I like samurai movies. I like some mafia movies. Like I like genre movies in general, I guess. I like period. I think things that are set in like particular periods are interesting. Like
Mhm.
especially if they're some particular part of the past. But yeah, I don't know.
I think one of the one of the we haven't really had that many conversations because I think we've been in the same room together a number of times, but we've only really spoken a couple of times.
Yeah.
But I do remember, I can't remember if this is online or in person, but we talked about Ennio Morricone at some point, and both of us being totally fascinated with his obvious genius.
Yeah.
What is there to say besides was great. But yeah, I remember you did we both covered at the time. We both covered various. Well, actually, you never covered a Morricone, did you? You did your own kind of spaghetti western type
Yeah,
stuff.
I had a split EP that I did with Darius Carlin, that was
Right.
Western themed. It was called West, and I had a track called The Outlaw, and he had a track called The Sheriff.
Yeah,
And it was
that's
very
awesome.
Morricone themed.
Yeah.
I think
that's
Darius
excellent.
Carlin's track even had like a ooh, ooh in it.
Yeah, right.
But I just
Right,
love like that like just a it's like they invented a entirely new genre of music out of thin air. I mean, I know that it's not thin air, but to someone who's not from Italy, like
Mhm.
it felt that way when I first heard it, and I was like, this is amazing.
And it's funny how it's the sound of westerns, even though it's Italian. I mean, obviously,
Totally
Italians did a lot of
arbitrary.
Western. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it feels
It's
totally
like,
arbitrary, but it works so well. It's amazing.
yeah, right. Yeah, I absolutely love that stuff.
Me too.
I mean, the first time, I remember when I was in college, the first time I heard the electric guitar in Once Upon a Time in the West, it just blew my mind. It's like, what? This is like, at first it was sort of like, well, this is a really dated electric guitar sound. Like the world had already moved on to like Hendrix and all this other stuff,
Right.
But anymore, when you pull out like this really dated kind of fuzz box, kind of, like literally a fuzz box, right? Like
Uh-huh.
a, hardware, unit that the guitar is plugged into, and it was so abrasive and intense, and it works so beautifully in that score. And then meantime, you've got like these full-on orchestral pieces and like, and choir pieces kind of blending in with the guitar, and then you got banjo and like all these other things. Yeah, it struck me as like an amazing world. It was probably the first time I really thought about film music was when I heard that score, and then I
Yeah.
went to see the movie like when I guess they, yeah, it was actually it was when they remastered. What's it called? What do they when they take a movie and they? Jesus, I can't believe I've forgotten this. Anyway,
Remake?
Scorsese oversaw. Well, they didn't remake it, but they took it and they
Re-release?
just
Remaster?
yeah, they cleaned it up. Yeah, they cleaned it up, kind of remastered, but There's another more technical word for it in film. Restored, yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Scorsese oversaw the restoration of Once
10
Upon a
points to
Time
Tamara.
in the West,
Oh, cool.
and I saw it at Lincoln Center, and I was just like, oh my god! And Scorsese came out on stage and introduced
Whoa,
it,
that's so
and
cool.
he was like, he looked like he had a couple too many lines, but he was otherwise in pretty good. he was really kind
I
of
can't
nervous.
see
I'm talking about
Scorsese as a cokehead.
Oh, dude. Read up a little bit. Yeah. I think he's pretty settled down now. He's an older guy, but
He can manage himself.
he was Robbie Robertson's roommate in where was that? L.A. I guess, right? I don't know where the hell they live, but
A lot of
Robbie
cocaine, huh?
Robertson, the guitarist from the band, they were
Sure.
roommates. So yeah, there was some drug use. But it was amazing, and I saw it on the big screen in Dolby surround sound, and it was just, oh my god, it blew me away. And I was just like, this is what a film soundtrack is. I understand now, the difference between a film soundtrack and these pop records that I've been buying.
Hmm. Yeah.
Chris was
Yeah.
baptized. So what's your baptism? What's your hey? Here's the moment.
Oh, Rich's, yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have in film? For what film or?
It's in general. When you had that click
Yeah.
moment of holy shit, that's the sound. That's what I want to replicate and give people that sensation or whatever the case is. I feel like everyone who gets into something creative has some moment where they go, this is the thing that drives me in the middle of the night when I think all my stuff is garbage. No, I want to still continue to do that one thing.
You mean specifically for film?
No, just
Or
in
music?
general, like music for you musically. What hit that switch? What ignited that spark?
Prague.
I think it probably was Prague. Yeah. I mean, I think because
All things are prog.
in the beginning, like guitar and like riffs. There's something about riffs that I was just like fascinated by. When I
Mhm.
was in high school and I was listening to like Rage and Tool, I mean that was,
Yep.
I mean that was like my happy place. So everything that I've done, I think, comes out of that. That's sort of like, I mean, there is also like some sort of foundation of the music that I listened to ambiently growing up because of my parents. That also kind of came into play. But as far as that, like the music that makes you make that, that like, that like face, yeah, like that was the music. Like that was really what got me going. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I started making music, was playing guitar and coming up with riffs and drop D and odd meters, pentatonics, all that kind of stuff. That's where it started.
Thank
Yes.
you, boy.
But you still also you still play guitar a bit. I noticed actually you did a collab with Grant Henry. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or was that? Yeah. I was like pretty recent. I mean, like, like I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something.
5 or 6 years
4
ago.
years ago.
Well, Grant
Yeah.
has a really large. He was a really huge influence on me because I stumbled across Metroid Metal back in like 2003 when I was just like starting to play guitar, and I was like, "This is so cool." These prog like metal covers of Metroid, and I never even really played Metroid, but I just thought the music was so amazing, and that community, him specifically, and the community really was one of the things that motivated me to make music. There was that community. There was also the Mini Bosses community, the video game cover band from Arizona. They had like a really active message board with a ton of future well-known game composers who were hanging out there. They had, there was this thing called Dwelling O'Duels, which was like a video game cover competition that would happen like every month, and there'd always be like a different theme, and a lot of it was like shredding, basically. But some people would do slightly different things, and that was really where I kind of sunk my teeth into making stuff and sharing music with other people, seeing what they think of it, just having like a peer group. So I owe a lot to Grant, and yeah, I
Yeah.
play
Awesome.
guitar. Guitar was my first instrument. It's the instrument I went to Berkeley with. I'm not a great guitar player. I see it more as like a something that I pick up if I have an idea and I try to like, noodle it out. And I've used it at various times. I did a guitar soundtrack for a game called Shoot Many Robots back in the day. And there's guitar on Triple Frontier. But I kind of go through phases with guitar.
Mhm. Right.
These days I tend to play the piano a lot more than I play guitar, um, but yeah.
You're getting old, Rich.
Yeah. It's these hands, they can't handle the pain of the...
I remember at one point there was talk on I don't know, APC someplace, I don't remember where, and you were part of it, a discussion about a
APC.
possible King Crimson cover release,
Oh,
chiptune
shit.
cover release. And I mean, Tamara and I actually covered Red, and did it
whole
live a
thing?
number of times.
The track
The
or the whole
song.
album? Okay.
The track.
Oh,
just
no, the
track.
song.
I have one of my exes drew me the cover art for that album. I've had it for like
Cool.
15 years or something because it was one of the albums that really inspired me when I was young. When
Yeah.
I was first getting into like classic prog, like that was the album that I was like
Yeah.
way into.
Yeah, I can understand that. But you never did a King Crimson cover in the end.
No, but there are a couple of songs that are very King Crimson-y that I've done.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely noticed that. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, not in a bad way, in a great way, like where it's just like a mild influence, obviously, and not, an overt kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about time signatures, and it's what fun it is to, to kind of concoct something that could be a relatively simple melody, but throw it into this weird environment of 11/8 or something like that, or 10/8, or and
Yeah.
it's super fun, becomes really interesting. It always blew my mind when I like find, like just watch these guys like that, just whatever playing together, the prog bands from back then. I saw an awful lot of them. I remember seeing like Gentle Giant and King Crimson and
Oh,
Genesis
cool.
and Yes, all of those bands. That was like my
Gentle Giant, the videos I've seen of them live were like insane. They seemed like
it's
very
unbelievable.
tight band.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Tamara and I have this joke where we watch. I can't remember which track. I think it's On Reflection. It's actually a madrigal with the 4 vocalists singing at the same time. in a
Oh, wow,
madrigal
yeah.
form.
Mhm.
And then they at a certain
Totally
point,
insane.
they're still singing the madrigal, but they're playing instruments as well. And the
Whoa.
bass player is playing a different part of the madrigal on his bass while he's singing. It's like
Holy
he's
cow.
singing one part, he's singing a different one on his, and
Totally
like his bass is
insane.
like this. It looks like he's having a stroke or something. Like he's singing, but his
Yeah.
face is it's stuck in guitar face the entire time.
Wonder of
There's
wonders.
some-
His brain, I'm sure, is split right down the middle, and one side's doing one
Yeah.
thing, the other side's doing the other.
There's some
Yeah,
amazing
Rachel.
videos of the drummer too. Just like he
Weathers.
just looks like he's like stoned out of his
Yeah.
mind, and he's like doing this
Yeah.
like crazy, like but he's so tight, and he's like, yeah, he's really feeling it. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll never understand
he had
the
a
drummers
special
who can
part.
also sing. Because
Mm.
you're
Oh,
talking
yeah,
about
right.
how much that like stuff that goes on, your diaphragm has just got to get squished the whole time. There's no way I could keep a
Right.
constant tone, a constant timbre, a constant volume. The quality of my voice would be all over the damn map.
A lot of practice. Definitely.
Clearly, and
Both hands,
core.
both feet, and your yeah.
I worked
Yeah,
with a
no.
few singing drummers, and they tend to get to a point where the drumming doesn't become secondary, but it becomes like course of nature. Like what they're doing with their limbs is so practiced
Yeah.
that they're not thinking about that. They're thinking
I
about
can't
the singing.
walk, Mike. I can't walk.
I know.
So-
I've tried to train you, but you just don't listen.
Oh,
Well,
my
very cool.
word.
I don't know how much time you've got, Rich. We've kept you here quite a while. I really appreciate your being part of this
yeah.
discussion. Does anybody have any other final questions for
My
Rich?
pleasure.
Yes, I do. I'm just curious. Like, do you how often do you sketch? Do you sketch like every day, or do you kind of like you were taught earlier, the process of, sounding and just writing, phrases and things just come while you're writing some other stuff, and then you kind of save that as part of your sketchbook? Or I'm just curious, like, I'm
Yeah.
always interested in, composers' processes.
I'm very I kind of work in waves. So I'll get into a headspace and I'll be at it every day maybe for a while. Then there are times when I don't do any writing for I might go months without writing. Like the last couple of years, I've gone some really long periods without doing any writing and been focusing on other things, whether it's like putting together an album of music I've already written or working on technical stuff or just taking a break completely. But I do, you know, there have been periods where I try to just sometimes I'll just sit down and play the piano with no particular intention in mind. Sometimes it's like therapeutic. Sometimes it's a little more intellectual, and I'm like stumbling onto potential ideas that I can record and save for later. I do have like a really large database of just like ideas
Mhm.
from over the years, and it's nice because I can go back and kind of like pull things out and like, oh, this might be perfect for this thing or whatever. Um, so
Yeah.
I definitely
Yeah,
don't have like a workman sort of like approach to it. I'm very like, I'm kind of watery about it. Like I kind of go in waves.
yeah, that sounds healthier, to be honest, than, putting.
Works for me.
I mean,
A little work-life balance.
yeah, I mean, when you have a project and a deadline, like that's one thing, but just,
Yeah.
like being a creator and just, pressure versus, trying to, blow your own rhythms, so to speak, is really that negotiation takes.
I think you're
Yeah.
right. Like it's really about like figuring out your own rhythm. I mean, and I think for some people, maybe what I do kind of thing would work, and other people maybe not so much. I mean, I know like Leonard Cohen, for instance,
Right.
he used to like wear a suit and like go to like where he would write, and he would do that every day. And I know Billy Joel used to do something similar. Like he was like it was like a job. Like he would go to the studio and he'd write every day, and it wouldn't it just maybe it would be
Yeah.
good, maybe not. And that's like a totally, cool, viable way to work too. But I get, I go through phases where I'm just not that interested in it, and I'd rather be doing something else. So that's just me personally.
Yeah.
Do you know the story about Leonard Cohen meeting Bob Dylan and talking about the composition process?
It's a good
No.
It's one of
story.
my favorites.
Yeah.
It's very short. So it was something like this. I'm probably forgetting some of it, but it was something like this. Oh yeah, nice to meet you, Mr. Dylan, Bob. Okay, I really love that song, "Blowing in the Wind." How long did it take you to write that? He said, I don't know. It's like probably 20 minutes, a half an hour or something a day. And he says, yeah, Bob says, I really love that song, Hallelujah, Leonard. It's really beautiful. And I wondered often how long it took you to write that. And he said, 5 years, banging my head against the door in a hotel room.
Sometimes those two stories happen in the
Poor
same
guy.
person too.
Yeah, it does. It does,
Yeah.
Sometimes it just comes out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, this is impossible. Like, don't know how to finish this.
The best thing for me ever as a composer was the 48-hour challenge on 8-Bit Collective. It was so useful. It was like, okay, I'm going to take
Those are
48 hours
great.
only and make
You know,
something,
I'm finally getting to a place now where I might have enough time to actually do like a 30 songs in 30 days type challenge again.
Really?
I used to be like I did that one time, maybe like a long time ago. And that was so valuable and fun. I did not do 30 days. I think I managed like 17 or 18, but I mean, it was super useful.
Were you part of, God, I'm totally forgetting the name of the site. Tamara, help me out here. Tim Lamb's.
Chipmusic.org?
Well, yeah, but I mean the specifically the
Weekly Beats.
Weekly
yeah,
Beat.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
not-
don't
Yeah,
think
which
I-
is one.
I don't think I ever did that one. I'm familiar with it.
that's also a fun.
Yeah.
I guess it's a little bit looser. Like you don't have to do it. You do it weekly, but you know,
Yeah.
you can kind of catch up, yeah, I wish I was doing that now. I really, podcast production is a little too grueling, unfortunately, for my attempting that.
She's a cruel mistress,
but
Chris. She
she's a cruel mistress.
demands payment. If you're not
Oh my God.
bleeding,
I mean, I know all of you have definitely come to that point where you sit down and you bring everything up and you've got all the tracks laid out and you look at it and go, nope.
I've been asked before to work on podcasts, and as soon as I start getting into it, I'm like, no, this is too much for me. It's too grueling.
Audio drama is even worse. I mean, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
As a production, the whole thing.
You're just literally doing all the work.
Yeah.
yes,
All of it.
I mean, yeah. Thankfully, there's a cast that I can rely on to actually play the parts.
Right, but then you got to mix everything too, and that
I mean, I love it, and I
I was
think
about to say, Chris, we wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy it. There's
no
maybe
doubt.
some masochism involved in that, but there's still some joy.
Oh yeah.
Another kind of competition. But anyway, thanks again, Rich, for being here. I really appreciate it. I know as soon as you get off, I'm going to think of 1,000 questions I didn't ask you, but we got to call it at some point. So please stay in touch.
Have me back. I'll come back.
All right.
Happy to do it. It's fun to hang out.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Awesome.
All right.
Take
Good
care,
to see
man.
you all.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye, Rich.
I really wanted to ask him.
I
who
wanted
did
to
his
mention-
hair.
The what?
Excellent.
His hair. His hair was amazing.
Dude,
His hair was amazing.
it was very nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
Rich has had
good.
nice hair.
That's a good question.
I want to make one announcement, two announcements actually. One is that there's a show coming up at Wonderville on September 4th, which is about a week from Saturday. Is that correct?
Next weekend, right? Not
Yes.
this one, but the one after.
Yeah, yeah, and it's it's a chiptune crowd show. The people who are involved are chiptune based, but not all of them are playing chiptune at the show. And our own Corset Lore is on the bill and going to be playing live
Nice.
her own specific, and she's got a
Yeah.
wonderful record that she's been working on, and I can't wait to hear it and see it come out.
You doing a full set?
So that is at one. Yep.
Nice.
What?
Yeah. He said.
Yeah,
Are you doing it?
I hope by the end. Actually, no, I'm definitely releasing it by the end of the year. There's just no. Hopefully this fall, but it is like Chris. Just to clarify, you mentioned chiptune and then chiptune kind of related things. So it's a chiptune and digital fusion show. That's kind of like what people are referring to the chip adjacent, idea as, I think, at this point. Yeah.
Awesome.
So it'll be so people should either please come out to Wonderville. That's why this is so exciting, because it's an RL show. It's in real life. So come out to this. It's also going to be streaming.
Damn, I was about to say, I'm not in
We
New York.
have
If I was in New York, I'd be there.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trip.
Bit of a hike.
well. Okay, well, people in the chat, you guys can watch the stream if you want.
Oh, I absolutely will.
We'll be streaming, and we'll have Chris Kaiser performing, who's like a chiptune vet from New York City. And we have Business Pastel, Wendy. She's great. She's awesome. And we have Demonic Sweaters. And that's really exciting. Justin's music is really interesting. It's like experimental chip and synth with drums that he plays live. So,
Nice.
Yeah. So,
And that'll be streaming right here, actually, on Wonderville NYC twitch.tv/WondervilleNYC next Saturday, and the
Yeah.
show starts at. Do you remember the time? Is it 7 p.m.
I think doors are at 7. Yeah.
or is it 7? So probably music at 8 or something p.m. Eastern time,
Yeah.
or somewhere there about maybe 7:30.
Yeah,
Cool. And
probably
the other
30.
announcement is that we're moving our Twitch stream to our own account. Hopefully next week. Right? Is that the plan?
Hell
He
or high
says
water.
uncertainly.
Hell or high water.
Hell or high water, we move it.
That
It may
shit will
be
be up.
a little rough around the edges our first time out, but it will be twitch.tv/Mandible Judy.
Ye of little faith.
And
Have that on
yeah.
lockdown.
and we will be we're working on the format a bit. We're going to do some new stuff, and we got lots of plans for the coming fall streams. So thanks for being here, everybody, and thank you so much to Wonderville. It's just been, the best possible professional relationship with those guys. Mark Klebe is wonderful. He's Wonderville wonderful, and just love being there in real life as well. And thankfully, those of us in New York can continue to go there in real life, and those of us not in New York can continue to log in to their Twitch stream. Monday nights especially are really fun with Matt Hawkins' Fort 90 stream, which is rare, weird movies and Japanese media and anime and all kinds of insane stuff. Machinima, it's like all over the place. So that's a super fun event. So do continue to check out Wonderville NYC. So what do you guys got to say for yourselves?
I'm so ashamed. I don't know.
Hey, look, here's Glenn, just as we
Okay,
sign off.
Right?
Nice.
Perfect
work.
time.
Oh, it's
Timing.
Glenn.
Wow.
Dean.
Glenn,
Good
maybe
work.
Hi, Glenn.
be a
Hi,
little more
everybody.
punctual next time.
Yeah, you're a little late, man.
We were literally just saying goodbye. Amazing.
Oh,
Hey, look, it's him. It's him in a car.
I am in a car.
Is it a new car?
He's like, oh, the stream's still going on. Let me check in and say hi. So I have.
It's
Bye.
Okay.
It's light there. Where the hell are you?
He's gotta
I
be
was
on the-
visiting.
Oh,
San Diego.
Yeah.
San Diego, yeah.
San Diego.
So nice.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah.
He's the anchorman.
Well, right
What?
on.
I visited there
Nice
for the
where you
first time,
are.
like last month. I haven't been down to San Diego yet. I finally got down there like last month.
I just finally got to go hiking in Joshua Tree. It was beautiful.
Nice.
Excellent. What are you up to right now?
Driving home and drinking red wine.
Hopefully
not
And doing homework.
simultaneously.
No, driving home, then drinking red wine while
Then.
doing.
Understood.
Nicely done.
What's your
Kids don't
what's your
drink
flavor?
and drive.
Yeah, don't drink and drive.
No. What do you mean? What's my flavor?
Cab, Shiraz.
Rose.
I like Shiraz, but I think what I have with me is a cab.
Spicy.
It'll do.
That'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do.
That'll
Have
do.
a nice Sauvignon. It gets you
Underberg wine
drunk.
out of a box.
Nice. Hey, I was always mad about
Nice
2020,
Chianti.
so I can't. Don't ask me.
Mad dog.
Well,
Aye.
Scotch whiskey is more my thing, but I think I just like picked up a bottle of red just for something different.
We had a wonderful scotch with Glenn in Philly. Do you remember that, Tamara? What was that?
What?
It was
A wonderful what?
Scott.
Scotch.
it was
Or was
called
it something-
Airstone.
Hardbag.
We didn't hear that.
It was called Airstone. Aerstone, I think.
Hardbag.
Okay.
Oh,
our
yeah.
bag.
You guys
So I-
not
Yeah,
hear
yeah.
me? No. All right.
No, yeah,
I
you're
might
lagging a
sound
little.
out, so I don't know if you hear
Yeah.
me or not.
No, you're just lagging a little bit. It's okay.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, our bag is that was good stuff.
Yeah, big fan of Ardbeg. Big fan of Lefroy.
Mhm.
Single or
I feel like I was
blended?
Single.
I wish I liked.
Yeah.
I gotta find a single I like. The peat is super. It's super peaty. It's very campfire, and I can't get into it. But the blended, for whatever reason, is just it's smooth and it works.
Pete's Brew.
For me, the smokier, the peatier, just like the closer to a leather shoe that I can get is my preferred flavor.
So I
If
have
it smells like I'm drinking a campfire with gasoline, then it's a
fair
good
enough.
chance I'm gonna like it.
I have a friend whose dad is a professional Scotch taster. I don't know, he's sommelier, I guess you call that, but up to and including the point that Scotch breweries or distilleries will hire him to like write the the notes, the descriptions of what each of these things are. And when I was over there, not that far out of high school, I was just leafing through things that were just on their dresser. Not in a creepy way, just in a I'm standing around waiting for whatever to happen.
Rifling through their stuff. Yeah.
Exactly right. And I found some of his notes, and one of them is, he goes, I don't remember what the hell the Scotch was, but it tastes pleasantly of horse sweat and shoe leather. And I was like, I don't know that I want to have that. But now that I'm older and I've had enough Scotch, I'm like, oh no, I get where that comes from. Like, give me a drink that tastes like old library dust, and I'm in it. Give me that.
I think it's a very interesting choice of particular animals' sweat.
Yeah, specifically a horse. I like that.
It's not quite a cow. It's more like a horse.
Well, so
Yeah.
have you ever been around like a bunch of farm animals?
No.
I grew up on a
Okay.
farm.
So horses have a
my
very
coworkers.
distinct, extraordinarily distinct sweat smell. Very different from cow, very different from camel. Horse sweat is horse sweat, and people
It's
who
not quite donkey.
no, it's not
Not
donkey.
quite donkey. Just horse.
It's between cow and
It's like right there between where you're talking about. You get your thoroughbreds, you got like your greyhounds, okay, and then in between there you've got horse sweat, and that's really what you want, right? If after you're done mucking out the stall, right, and then you like rub your face with the thing that you just rubbed your horse down with, it's you get to like it. The ladies, they really like that. It's a certain potpourri about it.
that's the real
We're
stuff.
still broadcasting, huh?
Talk
Absolutely still broadcasting.
Said.
Are we?
whiskey.
It's alive.
Yes,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
still on. Yeah, we're live, baby. We are live as we'll ever be.
Do we end on a high
I
note? Do we
forgot
end there?
what you guys.
I think we don't need to. Yeah,
I'm bum, but I'm not bum.
Twitter,
let's call it. I mean, Glenn
Twitch.
shows up. That
we love you. We'll see you next week. Tuesday,
Twitch.
Chris? We're going Tuesday, or we're staying
I'm
Thursday?
just typing. I'm just. Hang on. I'm just typing in Twitch. We're sorry.
I'm not
Okay.
sorry. Chris is sorry. I'm not sorry.
We went wrong.
We went wrong. Let's. No, next week we can do Thursday still.
All right.
Let's do Thursday next week on our channel, and then maybe we'll make the switch one. Does that make sense? Let's
Yeah.
talk this over, not in the stream. How about
Yes. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks so much, you guys.
We love you,
Love
Twitch.
you all.
See
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, Twitch audience.